Hi guys, during the first three lessons we explored part-part whole relationships where we were trying to find out either one of the parts or the whole amount. This week we're looking at the relationship between the parts, so rather than being interested in the whole amount, we're wanting to compare the parts and explore the difference between them. In order to do this, we're going to set up our bars in a slightly different way in order that we can make direct comparisons between the two of them. To begin with, let's get thinking. Here we've got Bart and Lisa and they've got some cookies. And Marge is asking, how many different questions can you come up with about Bart and Lisa's cookies? I'd like you to take a few minutes to come up with as many questions as you can with your partner and then ask those questions for others to answer. You might want to use words like altogether, more than, less than, fewer, or any other words you can think of to help create those questions. How many different questions did you come up with? We could ask questions like, how many cookies does Lisa have? So we could count the cookies to find out that she's got 5. Or how many cookies does Bart have? Again, we could count to find there's 9, or we could use those 5 cookies that we know Lisa had and then count on an extra 4. We might ask questions like, how many cookies do they have altogether? So we could add up the cookies they each have to find out that there are 14 cookies altogether. Or we could ask questions like, how many more cookies does Bart have than Lisa? Or how many fewer cookies does Lisa have than Bart? So for each of those questions, we're interested in finding the difference between Bart and Lisa's cookies. So we can see that it's those 4 extra cookies that Bart has. Next, I'd like you to discuss the following problem with a partner. Mr. Burns has £13, Smithers has £7. How much more does Mr. Burns have? Again, the most important thing isn't the answer here. The most important thing is that you can explain how you would work that out. So you might want to do that using your fingers, using resources, or drawing pictures. So pause the video for 2 to 3 minutes and have a go at that. For this, I'm going to start by putting out those £13 that Mr. Burns has. So there they are there. Then I'm going to put out the £7 that Smithers has got. And what we're interested in here is working out how much more does Mr. Burns have. So we're interested in the difference between the two amounts. Now I can see Smithers has got £7 there, and I can match that with that first £7 that Mr. Burns has. And what I'm interested in are those extra pound coins. It's the difference between the 7 that Smithers has and the £13 that Mr. Burns has. I'm going to use my fingers to count on from 7 to 13. So let's start at 7 and count on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I can see that I've counted on 6 coins. So Mr. Burns has got £6 more than Smithers. It's time to get investigating with a partner. I've got 2 problems that I want you to have a look at today. I want you to analyse those problems and then solve them using whatever resources you've got available to you. And I want you to explain how you worked it out by drawing pictures. So the first question is, Milhouse has collected 13 comics, Martin has collected 31 comics. How many more comics has Martin collected? And the second question is, Ned and Homer are cooking burgers. Ned has cooked 16 burgers. Homer has cooked 17 more burgers than Ned. How many burgers has Homer cooked? Pause the video for 8 to 10 minutes and work with your partner in order to analyse and solve each of those problems. Let's discuss how we might work out that first problem. Milhouse has collected 13 comics, Martin has collected 31 comics. How many more comics has Martin collected? So to begin with, I'm going to put out those 13 comics that Milhouse has collected. Then I'm going to put out the 31 comics that Martin's collected. And what I'm interested in here is the difference between the two. So how many more comics would Milhouse need in order to have the same as Martin? In order to work this out, I can use different strategies. I might start with Martin's comics, start with the 31, and I might take away 13 in order to find out that difference. Or I could find that difference by counting back from 31 down to 13. But this time I'm going to count on. I'm going to start with the 13 comics that Milhouse has got, and I'm going to see how many more I would need to count on in order to get up to Martin's 31 comics. Now I'm going to use the resources to help me, and I'm going to record those steps on a number line. So I'm starting with the 13 that Millhouse has got, and I'm going to count on to the 31 that Martin has. Now I could do this one at a time. I could start at 13 and count 14, 15, 16, 17 and so on. Or is there an easier way to do this than having to count one at a time? So from 13, the first thing I'm going to count on is 7. And the reason I've counted on 7 is because that takes me up to 20. It takes me up to a friendly number. Now from 20, I've still not reached 31. So what I might do next is count on a 10 because that takes me up to 30. And all I'm left to count on now is the 1 to get me up to 31. So you can see from 13, I've counted on 7 and then 10 and then 1. So all I need to do now is add up those jumps. Now to make that easier for myself, I might add that in a different order. So rather than adding the 7, then the 10, then the 1, I might start with the 10 first. So I'm starting with 10, I'm adding 7 to get 17, and then I'm adding 1 to get 18. So for this question, Martin has collected 18 more comics than Millhouse. Next, let's look at the problem with Ned and Homer. Ned and Homer are cooking burgers. Ned has cooked 16 burgers. Homer has cooked 17 more burgers than Ned. How many burgers has Homer cooked? So again, I can start by drawing a bar to represent the number of burgers that Ned has cooked. I'm going to draw a longer bar to represent the number of burgers that Homer's cooked because I know that he's cooked more burgers. Let's use resources to represent those 16 burgers that Ned's cooked. Now Homer has matched those 16 burgers, but then he's cooked an extra 17 burgers. And what we're trying to find out is how many burgers Homer's cooked altogether. So we can see here that in order to do that, we can start with the 16 that Ned's cooked and we can add on an extra 17, and that's going to tell us how many burgers Homer's cooked. I'm going to use counting on again to solve this. I'm going to start with my 16, but this time I'm counting on 17 to work out how many burgers there are altogether. I can't add 16 and 17 in one go, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into parts to make it easier for myself. Now again, rather than counting on one at a time, I can do this in chunks, and we can do this in different ways. We might start at 16 and add the 10 to begin with. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 of those burgers to begin with. Now the reason I've added 4 is because that's taken me up to 20. From there, I'm going to count on the 10, and that's taken me up to 30. And I've only got 3 left to count on, so when I add on those 3, I can see that Homer has cooked 33 burgers altogether. Now you could have done that in lots of different ways, so you might want to think about what are the other ways we could have done that. It's time to discuss our success criteria. So pause the video for a few minutes, and with a partner I want you to think about how did we achieve success? What are the steps that we can go through in order to solve any problem where we're comparing two amounts? With each of these problems, the first thing that we did was we drew bars to represent each of the parts that we were comparing. So in this case, we drew parts for both Millhouse and Martin. Once we've done that, we can then draw a bar or an arrow to represent the difference between the two parts. Now that we've done that, we can describe the parts. Here we've got Millhouse's comics, we've got Martin's comics, which is a larger bar, and we can see we've got the difference between the two. After that, we can then write the values that we know. And in this case, we knew that Millhouse had 13 comics, Martin had 31 comics, and it was the difference that we were looking for. Now that we've analysed that problem, we can then choose a strategy to solve it. And in this instance, we counted on. We started at the 13 comics that Millhouse had, and we counted on to the 31 comics that Martin had. Now we didn't do this one at a time, we counted on in jumps. We counted on 7 to get to 20 because it's a friendly number, then we counted on 10 to get to 30, then finally we counted on 1. Once we'd counted on from 13 to 31, we could then add up those jumps. So we added 10 and 7 and 1 to find out that Martin had 18 more comics than Millhouse. It's time to try that out. As usual, I've got 3 problems and 3 lots of numbers within each of those problems. Remember, choose the colour that's right for you. So if I'm looking at question 1 and I want to use the yellow numbers, it reads, Ralph and Nelson each have a bag of marbles. Ralph has 12 marbles and Nelson has 4 marbles. How many more marbles does Ralph have? For question 2, I'm going to use the green numbers. Principal Skinner and Mrs. Crabapple are reading the same book. Principal Skinner has read 18 pages. Mrs. Crabapple has read 19 more than him. How many pages has she read? And for the third question, I'm going to use the red numbers. Grandpa and Dr. Hibbert are collecting stamps. Grandpa has 125 stamps. Dr. Hibbert has 49 less than Grandpa. How many stamps does Dr. Hibbert have? Remember, I don't want just an answer. I want you to analyse those problems using bars. I want you to solve them using resources and explain how you work that out by drawing pictures. If you manage all of those in the time, then why don't you make up 3 similar problems for somebody else to analyse and solve? Pause the video for 10 minutes or so and have a go at those. It's time to reflect on today's learning. So I want you to pause the video for a few minutes and discuss the following questions with a partner or with the rest of the class. What have you learned today? What did you find easy or difficult? Did you get stuck? What helped you when something got tricky? What do you need more help with? What is really making you think? And what are your next steps? The last thing I want you to do is, can you apply what we've learned? So as a class, I want you to discuss, analyse and solve the following problem. Now it's slightly different to the problems we've looked at so far, so have a look at it and see if you can spot what's different. Bart and Lisa are collecting conkers. Bart has found 6 more than Lisa. Altogether, they have found 16 conkers. How many conkers has Bart found? Thanks for joining me again today. I hope you enjoyed that. Once again, if you've got any questions or any comments about today's lesson, you can contact me at scott.morrow@southayrshire.gov.uk or you can tweet me at scottmorrowsa. Next week, we're going to look at part-whole problems again, only this time we're going to analyse and solve multi-part problems. I hope you can join me then.